Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Today is Monday, December 3rd, 2018. We're here for the purpose of the Committee of the Whole. I would ask that you all recognize that we already said the pledge and ask Clerk Cyprian to call the roll.
Levin,
Here.
Park,
Here.
Conquest,
Here.
Kennedy, absent.
He's all in the same place. He's around. but-
He's around,
Yeah,
okay.
he's around.
Mulliner,
Here.
Brennan,
Here.
Sabatino,
Here.
Deuter. Here. Dunn,
Here.
Leader,
Here.
Lumsky. Here. Graham,
Here.
Saludo,
Here.
York,
Here.
14 present.
14 present, 0 absent. We have a quorum. We are in session. Any announcements from the dais? What? No? Kennedy?
Kennedy left. Alderman Kennedy left.
13 present, 1 absent. We still have a quorum. Any announcements besides Alderman Kennedy's not here? Oh, he's okay with that.
Let's feature that, yeah.
Seeing none, we'll go on to public comments. Clerk Cyprian, at this time, has anybody signed up on our sign-up sheet for public comments?
No, they haven't, Pam Riley.
Okay, that's it for folks who signed up. Is there anybody in the audience, specifically Mary or Bob, who wishes to address the council at this time? Take that as a no. I don't see any hands. Okay, agenda item 4, a review of fiscal year 2019 budget. We are at, as I said during my report in the last meeting, we are at our circle back. Looking forward to any additional questions or comments, possibly motions to amend the budget. Anything you want to add, City Manager?
Thank you. We did put together a memo regarding each of the circle back items with some additional detail. We did receive a question or two regarding that, so thank you for getting that to us, and we tried to supply that information today as well. So if there are additional questions, we are here to answer them.
Okay, well, we will try to stay in order. City Manager, why am I have an extra sheet here for residential stormwater management. Is that issued after this? Is that what it is?
Yeah, I believe that's the memo from Kent Johnson.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the additional question that we got, and so the information provided.
Okay, and everything else is in the other memo?
Correct.
Posted? Was that posted or?
Yes.
What?
Okay. Was that posted?
Yes,
that
it was,
additional?
but it was posted today.
Okay.
I'm sorry, it was a December 3rd
Okay.
memo.
Well, in case you want to look that up on the line, we will get to that last.
I will fire back up my computer.
My computer's not working.
There is.
We're going to try to go in order. Doesn't mean conversation can't go whichever way or direction the council wills it to go. Line item number 1, Visitor and Tourism Community Grant Program. Alderman Levin, you pulled this.
I did. Thank you. The reason I pulled it is that for twofold. One is it's not any, well, I'll do it backwards. I noted that the explanation is due to a possible American Legion community grant, which is true. That one of the things the council may recall is that when Public Affairs and Safety reviewed itself the grant that was given to the American Legion, the policy decision was made to put that request or any request from the Legion in line through the traditional program, and there is an attachment A that has been added by staff that talks about the levels and different kinds of grants. I think I would call this, it's due to additional funding for a possible American Legion community grant, or for any other allocation that the grant committee might recommend to public safety. But I think that in total, I would recommend that the amount be decreased by, instead of, let me do it this way, the recommendation is an increase of $34,000, and I think probably, given what the budget's been, an increase of $20,000 would be sufficient. And I would make a motion.
Make a motion. So just so I, literally on the same page, page 157, line item 6032 is currently 178,400. you wish to reduce that by 14,400, is that right?
Yes.
How much?
Or another way to put it, 178,600. Uh-oh. Noticed a typo. The J form says 178,600. Oh, that's projected for, copy 2020, okay. City manager, we're doing 19, right? So it would be off of the 178,400,
That's correct.
400 minus, so it's really, yeah, 14,000.
64.
We do it backwards, 148, 200, plus 20,000. So you want to change that line item to, am I doing this right? 168, 2,000? Is that
Yes,
right?
I believe that's correct.
Wow, that took me way too long to get there. All right, we have a motion to reduce the line item of 6032 under Community Grant Program from 178,400 to 168,200. Do I have a second? Second by Alderman Bram. Discussion. Alderman Leader, you have discussion you wish to add?
Yeah.
Okay,
Uh,
floor is yours.
It hasn't been a good week for me. My snow blower stopped blowing. My dryer, clothes dryer stopped drying. And my gas fireplace on my family room stopped heating. It's just been one of those weeks, and my hearing aid is not working very well tonight. So I'm going to crave everyone's indulgence, especially you, Mayor, that I may not hear everything that goes on around this dais tonight, so it's hard to carry on an intelligent debate when you can't hear well. This diocese does not have good acoustics at best, and the sound system isn't good, and some of us, myself included, don't always speak into the microphone. So I might ask you on occasion, Mr. Mayor, to clarify things for me. First of all, Alderman Levin is my friend. No matter what happens tonight,
She objected.
he's my friend. Sorry, it's the way it is. And he has supported all the way, all three of the grants to the Legion, every penny of them. And he also supported, aside from myself and Alderman Mulliner, the video gaming in the narrow sense for the Legion and Legion only. So my brothers and sisters at the Legion are very grateful for his support. He's a good guy, and I wouldn't even begin to question his motives. He's been a friend of the Legion, and he still is. Now, having said that, I wanted to read you some figures, which I just kind of discovered right now, or while other things were going on. Now, the figures I'm reading you are from 2017 of 12 organizations, all fine organizations that the city grants money to. And I'm going to read you the amount approved in 2017 and the amount recommended for 2018. The Elmhurst Art Museum approved 20,000, that was in 2017, recommended 27,000 this year. The Elmhurst Chamber of Commerce approved 14,000 in 2017, recommended 20,000 this year. The following stayed the same. Elmhurst Choral Union, 2,500. J.C.'s, 5,000. St. Patrick's Day Parade, 25,000. 18,000 for, no, that's the, pardon me, the Elmhurst Symphony. Not only can't I hear, I can't read. The Elmhurst Symphony, 25,000. That stayed the same. St. Patrick's Day, 18,000, stayed the same. Spring Road, Green Man, Spring Road Business, etc., stayed the same. Elmhurst College, Special Kids Day, 5,500, staying the same. And one particular important one that I think should have doubled, and that is the Elmhurst Cycling Classic, 12,500. That should have doubled. And finally, the Elmhurst City Center, 10,000. Okay. Point is, the city has been very generous and has actually kept these organizations the same or raised them. And it's been a good year for the city. You know, I wish I could knock on wood. Oh, knock on your head. Knock on my head. All right. Now, as far as the Legion, of course, we're talking about a haircut of how much? 40% right off the top. Right off the top without even starting. I thought it was actually 30 to 20, that the 4,000 was for something else, but it doesn't matter. There's the 20. Now, here's the point. I happen to believe that when people can't compromise, government breaks down. People start killing each other, quite frankly. The Civil War is a perfect example. And I want to compromise tonight. I really want to compromise. I don't want to fight, especially with friends. I don't want to fight. And I'm okay with reducing this to $20,000. But my only caveat is this. I've got so much paper here, it's hard to find. I would like to know the actual wording, which I probably won't hear, but what is the actual wording, Scott, of what you're proposing? Could you give me that?
Alderman Levin?
Yes. I'm not proposing to take any wording out about the explanation for the increase. I mean, I'm just trying, and if you feel that it's not a magic number, I just feel that I felt when making the motion that the 34,000 was probably beyond the expectation of where we should increase our grants, and feeling that let the grant committee do its work. So it's based, the only wording is changing the line from 178.4 to 168, or whatever the mayor said we came up with, 168.
All right. So that
14,004 or less, so the net effect is it's an increase of $20,000.
Okay, so the bottom line is 20 grand, right? Okay, that's okay. So the increase in this amount is due to additional funding, I'm reading the line, for a possible American Legion community grant. Here's what I'm afraid of, and I'll lay it out for all of you because you're all fair-minded people. What we're saying is that even before we look at the Legion, we've cut them down to 20 grand, even before we start. Then the Legion has to go before the Community Grant Committee, Public Affairs and Safety Committee, and finally the City Council. What I'm afraid of is that this 20,000 isn't 20,000. It could be 15,000, could be 10,000, could be nothing. It's giving away, what this is essentially is a bargaining chip, the 30,000. That's all. It's a bargaining chip. It's a number, placeholder number. In fact, I'll go so far, and this part I wrote, so I'll read it. That's the wrong thing. The original line in the budget reads, "The increase in this amount is due to additional funding for a possible American Legion community grant. The figure is 30,000. This does not mean the 30,000 is being granted to the Legion. It only means that possibly some or all or none of this money will be granted to the Legion. The final figure will be determined by the Community Grant Committee, the PA&S Committee, and finally by the City Council." So what I'm saying is, should the final number be 30, 25, or some lesser number like 20, I will accept it. But you're asking me to give a blank check, and there are enemies of the Legion, to give a blank check to the enemy, and there are enemies of the Legion. I'm not saying who you are or who you're not. But you know that there are people who don't like the Legion, who don't want to give the Legion any money, who have consistently not given the Legion any money. What protection? Can't you give me, my brothers and sisters at the Legion, a little protection on this thing? How about this? I mean, I'm talking about the real world here. How about reading this? The 20,000 increase in this amount is due to additional funding for the American Legion. If you are comfortable with a $20,000 figure, just take the possible out. Just do it. Because if you can't do it tonight, you're never going to do it. And I guess you'll prove my point. So, if you want to give the Legion 20,000, okay. If you want to give the Legion this 40% haircut, okay. I'll take it. But this word possible, it means you can do anything you want. All right. I have a prepared speech. I really don't want to give it. I'd really like to get the 20, or some, if you can't take the word possible out, then give me some consideration, say that, okay, this number is okay. We're not going to try to cut any more. All right, that's all I'll say for now. Let's see where it goes. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Clerk Cyprian to read the motion that we have in front of us, just so I make sure we're all on the same page.
It's to amend that page 157, item 6.32, to reduce that by 14,400 to 168,200.
It should be 168,000,
200.
164,000.
Reduction of 10,000.
I'm going after the item number under the 2019 budget. It's 178,400. If we reduce it by, that's why I wanted to clarify. Reduce it by 14,400, you get to 168 even. Alderman Levin, is that reflected?
Mayor, why is it
164.
why is it
What did I say?
14.4?
Why is it 14,400?
Are you suggesting 30 to
Oh.
20?
So for clarification, it's not, Alderman Leader was saying 30, and I think in discussions it has been talked about as 30, but the actual proposed increase in the budget you're seeing is 34,400. So when Alderman Leader was saying 30, it would be, he was referring to that 34,400 number.
Yeah.
So I just want to clarify what we're talking about. If I go back to the budgeted number for 2018, it was 144,000. Okay, see that?
Correct.
Alderman Levin, you're proposing that that number be, call it
Increased by-
increased to 20,000.
Right.
That's it.
Exactly.
All right, forget all the other subtraction. Let's do addition. I'm better at that. Yeah, Alderman, soon to be someday Alderman, City Manager Grabowski?
I'll glad to stay as the city manager right now, thank you.
Okay.
Just to kind of explain the difference there, what happens in each year is we cut a check for the insurance on the St. Patrick's Day Parade, and so that kind of carries over into the next year. So the budgeted amount was 144, but it looks like it was more than that because of that carryover.
I understand. At this point, though, the motion is to have that line item, when it's all said and done, be $164,000. Okay, that's what we're talking about. Additional comments or questions? Alderman Bram.
Thank you. In regards to the motion at hand, I don't want to speak for Alderman Levin, but my perception of what he stated was that he's reducing or proposing to reduce the overall budget amount for the community grant program. It could be interpreted, as I believe Alderman Leader is interpreting it as, again, not speaking for Alderman Leader, that those dollars are being taken away from the American Legion due to the J form that's on the opposite page. I think overall, though, Alderman Levin specifically isn't changing wording on the J form or making any specific requests. He's saying the dollar amount should be minus that 14.4. When discussion happens within the committee and then eventually the council, of all those listed that are on that attachment, all those various, as it says on the attachment, agencies, those dollars could be distributed any way we as a council see fit. So that could mean that the Legion would receive, or would be proposed to receive, the full 34.4, 20,000, as Alderman Leader said, $0. It could reflect a different organization that received more or less. But overall, the way I'm reviewing, or my perception of this motion, is that we're saying, okay, the dollar amounts for all of the community grants to be reduced by $14,400. That, to me, doesn't directly state, even though you can make that speculation from the J form, that we're taking any monies away from any specific one organization. It could be one, or it could be many. And that's how I just wanted to communicate my perception of this motion, because otherwise it would have been, I think, more of a specific motion saying that the American Legion shall, making a motion for the American Legion to receive a proposed dollar amount. But in this case, it's the overall grant program.
Alderman Palomsky.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a couple points of clarification. I don't like to speak for other aldermen, but I can confidently say that nobody up here is the enemy of the Legion. I want to talk a little bit about the spreadsheet that has the dollar amounts for the community grant. As a reminder, it's funded with hotel motel tax dollars, which the council years ago earmarked for initiatives that support visitors and tourism. So the criteria involved that the grant committee examines is how many people it could bring into Elmhurst, how many people participate, how engaging the type of activity is. And when you look at the dollar amounts listed, if you divide it by the number of participants at those events, the average is between $1 and $2 per person of the existing community grant recipients. When we looked at the Legion, there were two different events. One was the Thanksgiving Day dinner, and the other one was the military ball. The military ball grant from the city came out to about $150 a person, not $1 to $2. And I It's my understanding that the report that this council approved stated that from now on, the Legion will apply for a grant through the community grant process. Thanks.
Alderman Deuter?
Thank you, Mayor. I support this amendment. I think it's an appropriate amendment. I think when we look at the funding for this program, Alderman Leader went through the recipients of funding in 2018 compared to 2017, noted that there had been a couple of organizations that received increase in funding. The reason there was an increase in funding is because one of the recipients that had consistently been receiving $15,000 each year was the Lazadro Museum. And for the first time, they did not apply for funds through the community grant program. So the funding, even though these increases happened in 2018, the total amount spent for this program did not change. It was $140,000 in 2017 and $140,000 in 2018. But because Lazadro did not apply, the committee that considers these applications had an additional $15,000 to allocate. So if you look at that $15,000 plus the 20 that we are proposing in this budget to be increased, the committee has a fair amount of dollars to figure out who are the most worthy recipients. So I support this motion, and I think it's a good approach to take.
Any additional comments? Alderman York?
Thank you, Your Honor. I guess I was expecting that, I guess I'd like to ask the finance director, whoever might have the answers, what all is the $75,000 in line item number 6098 on page 57? Because originally, I think Alderman Levin's request was to move $30,000 from that line item to the community grant program, which that makes sense to me. And then, as others have suggested, let the committee do the work in figuring out who gets what. But what all are we talking about in other expenses there for $75,000?
That is all the city center dollars that we've allocated.
Okay. I recall that. Okay, so really the $30,000 was never a part of that number.
Correct.
I mean, the 30,
Oh, I'm sorry, no, it
the
was the year before.
Legion dollars were never in that category to begin with.
It was, if you look at the year before, it's 105,
Yes, it is.
the 35.
Okay. So then that got reappropriated then into the, okay, I follow it now. Well, for the record, I'm fine with I'm fine with the way it is, and let the committee do the work they need to do. A number of years ago, when the city was experiencing stress in its general fund, we reduced this budget for the community grant program significantly. And since that point in time, revenues into the hotel motel tax have increased, probably at or exceeding where they were in 2009 or before the economic recession. So I'm fine with the $30,000 as was originally discussed. I don't think we need to be discounting it at this point in time, and then let the committee who evaluates the applications for the community grants do the fine work that they do, and when they make the recommendation to PAS. That's where I am.
Alderman Brennan?
So I'm not quite sure how thank you, Mayor. I'm not quite sure how we got to the 34,400 increase year over year, but in the budget column. You know, I agree with Alderman York. I would actually be a proponent and you know, as decisions are made for this fiscal year, I would love nothing more than, you know, the 30,000 to stay aligned with the Legion. And I don't think we've forced the hand from the perspective of, I think if they leverage 10,000 of that money or that grant on consulting to help them optimize and come up with some creative ideas on how they might be able to streamline their operation and operate more efficiently, I think that would be something of interest. But again, I think to have the flexibility to have the 30K in the budget, again, if it ends up being 34,400, I'm not quite sure where the 4,400 came from. But the increment of 30,000 on this budget, I would certainly support that.
Alderman Toledo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this, unfortunately, is not, or should not be, about the American Legion. This line item is titled Community Grant Program. I'm going to take an unusual step. I'm normally very complimentary of staff, but whoever filled out this J form made this about the American Legion because of the description that they put in the J form. In my opinion, community grant program, if it needs to be expanded, should be expanded. But it should be expanded because the program as a whole should be expanded, and we as a council believe that to be true. It shouldn't be expanded for one possible applicant. And that's what we have in front of us here. And that's forced us to have this conversation now, instead of going through the appropriate process at the committee level, through the grant committee. Last year's budget, 2018, which was fully spent, I believe, was $144,000. The proposal in the original budget was to increase that by $34,400 for a specific applicant or a possible specific applicant. Even with the amendment, this would still be an increase in the community grant program if that's what we believe we should do. Which means that we would have more money in 2019 than in 2018 to pass out to the existing applicants or additional applicants in 2019. So we would still be expanding the community grant program. So I will support the amendment to decrease the proposed budget, but still increase the community grant program in 2019 for any applicant that may choose to apply. Thank you.
Anyone who's not had an opportunity to speak, wish to chime in? Alderman Mulliner.
I think that my colleague addressed this very well. This is probably misworded in the J form. This is a request to increase the community grant program by $34,400. And it's not, as we all know, we've changed that process of going through to get these grants, and we now have a grant committee that looks and reviews these. I think that what this does is it does exactly what we've been stating on this side, and that is that it clearly says, here's an additional $34,000 that can be used for whomever applies for grants. It may be that it's determined that some of the places where they took a small haircut need to have an increase and bring that number back up. It may be that the American Legion comes in and says that we want a grant for this amount, but we won't be the determining factor until the grant committee has come back and made that decision. So I support leaving the dollars at $30,440, the additional whatever it was before, leaving the budget as it was existing, and giving the opportunity for the grant committee to review whatever happens, and then we can determine what the decision is, and we can have a debate about who should get those dollars at that time. I think at this time, we need to set the fence as to what level we want it, and I believe the fence is being set appropriately based on what the staff has recommended.
Anyone who hasn't had an opportunity to speak yet? I'm going to chime in for just a second. First of all, a lot of good conversation. However, as it relates to this motion, this is simply to set a dollar amount for this line item. That's all it is. Let me be blunt. I believe that this falls in the lap of all elected officials. This is a political football, and it has been for 5 years. If staff puts it in, somebody complains that it's in, if staff takes it out, somebody motions to put it back in. So I think staff is in an interesting position, but that's what they get paid for. So it's okay that sometimes they can't keep all 17 of us elected officials happy. I think we all know, I know the report, if you look at the committee report that relates to this line item, I don't think the committee report said, put this amount into this budget, but the committee report did say, put this item in community grant. The fact that staff put that amount into the budget, well, again, political football. So, but at this point, it has been said a couple of times, the motion is only for the community grant program at this time. It's not for the Legion, even though that's in the J form. It's not specifically for the Legion. That's not to say that this council, in fact, I think Alderman Mulliner, 3 or 4 years ago, made a specific motion during budgets to put $50,000 in the budget for the Legion. So, we can do all that. You folks sitting here have the power to do that if you want to do it. This motion right now only refers to setting a specific dollar amount for a specific line item in the budget. You can even motion to reword the J form if you want, but that's not what's before us. So that's just my 2 cents. For anybody who's asking, as chairman, I recognize this motion is only increasing, only setting, not increasing, decreasing. Forget that, because that involves math. We are just setting a dollar amount for this line item. Happy to continue the conversation. Alderman Levin.
All right. So I think it's been a very helpful discussion, and I appreciate hearing all the comments all the way around the dais here. And I think my concern has been that is the policy decision to move this request off of this dais for the initial evaluation for whatever the Legion comes in with to the Grants Committee. And it can always be changed later for whatever reason the council or the committee wants. Hearing Alderman York's comment, I think with that understanding, I will vote against my own motion, because if we all understand that the money that's going in is to increase the grant program so that the grant committee can allocate as it deems fit for review by the Public Affairs and Safety Committee and by the council, that's okay. I just don't want to have, because we didn't decide, and I'm not wanting to decide, that we're picking a dollar amount higher or lower for the Legion. That is my concern, and I know there was discussion at my committee, and maybe I telegraphed to staff something that was picked up wrong. Doesn't matter. So with the understanding, with the record we have, this will be on video, that we're increasing the grant line by the 34,800, whatever number was in there originally. I can live with that as long as we understand as just grant money for applicants.
Would you like to withdraw your motion?
I would, but other people may not want it withdrawn, so.
Who was the second?
I was.
Alderman Brand, would you concur with the main motion?
Yeah, it's up to him. If he wants to withdraw, I'll second.
We can go back, we can have additional conversation, but I suggest in that case, if the main motioner wants to withdraw, sounds like we have concurrence with second. So, back to where we were.
25 minutes
withdrawn?
later.
It was withdrawn. Motion has been withdrawn. I got that from
I'm the mover.
Alderman Levin.
The movant,
He moved it back.
taker and the mover.
And I'll entertain additional comments, questions, or anything else.
Call the question.
There's no,
There's no motion, so you can't even call the question. Alderman Toledo.
So just to maintain the logic, thank you, Mr. Mayor, just to maintain the logic that I was going along with related to if we believe that this community grant program should be expanded, which it seems that everyone does here, And it also seems that I've heard several people make comments that it's not necessarily for a particular applicant, but that for any applicant, that we want to expand this community grant program. And that the grant committee and the Public Affairs and Safety Committee, when the time comes in the normal course of the year for the grant process to commence, will go through the appropriate process, and that'll come back to the council. So I will motion, because what bothered me the most was the J-form description, as I stated in my earlier comments. So I will make a motion to modify the J-form explanation to read that the increase in this account is due to additional funding for an expanded community grant program, period. Unless someone else has some other language, but that seems to address it for me.
All right, I'm going to try to clarify, and make sure Clerk Spencer, Cyprian, almost 3 hours without screwing it up.
Yeah, we got there.
So you want to modify the J form under B. This increase is due to the,
Due to additional funding for an expanded community grant program.
I'll second.
I'll third.
well, at least call her Alderman, didn't get her last name wrong. Clerk Cyprian, does that, you want to read that for the record?
Yep, move to modify the J form to say additional funding to expand the community grant program.
The increase in this count is for additional funding to increase. Alderman York,
I'll second that motion.
second. Additional conversation. Alderman Bram.
Thank you. I have no problem with the J-form currently as written. The reality is the dollars are allocated for potentially the utilization for the American Legion. That's why they were added. I mean, I think we're going, no offense to anyone, but a little bit wordsmithing here. The rationale behind it is to include the American Legion. It wasn't done previously for the, I don't know, the organization here, the Love Christian Clearinghouse, due to the, blew it up too big, due to the very low amount. I mean, they asked for $30,000 and recommended was $2,000. But it is a specific reason. I mean, it is up to the committee to decide where those dollars go to, but the J-form is the J-form. It's saying why we're doing it. It's too, at least in my perspective, too generic, too general to say, well, we're just expanding it. Well, why are we expanding it? It's this, to me, the current J-form tells me the reason and the rationale. Just to say to expand it, to me, it doesn't say, okay, do we have the dollars to cover that? Why are we doing that? Are we going to include another 5 different organizations? What are we doing? At least here, I know the rationale behind it, and anybody looking at the budget book knows the rationale. I'm comfortable with adding dollars for the American Legion. I don't know if $34,400 is the right amount or not, but that's to be discussed at another time. So I don't know. I don't see a reason to support the changing of the verbiage in the J-form.
Additional conversation as it relates to the changing of the J form. Alderman Mulliner.
I think that it's the appropriate thing to do because we don't know who is going to come in and make a request for the community grant program. You know, the cycling group may decide this year that they don't need the money. They magically came up with all the money that they need. They may come in and say that they need double what they have. We may see the art museum come in and say, we need extra money. The American Legion may not even show up. We're now putting it in a spot where it's on whatever organization we have in the community to come forward and say, we would like to get involved with this grant, or we would like an increase in that grant. By saying that it's specifically for one group, we're saying that we're expecting that group to come forward. They don't have to come forward. No one has to come forward, and other groups can come forward and ask for more money. And that's why I believe that this is the right way to word it, and I think that this is the right decision to make, to leave the numbers where they're at and change the J form.
Alderman Deuter.
Thank you, Mayor. I absolutely support this motion. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think especially given there have been a few different times in recent budget discussions where dollars have gone into the budget, but with the notion of, this doesn't mean that we're going to spend these dollars in this way, it just means dollars are available. And yet, I think staff and even some of the aldermen have interpreted that as a decision and a commitment to spend the funds in the way that it's reflected in the budget. So I think this clarifies the intent of what this increase is, and I think it will help all of us and staff going forward to have it be specified as directed by this motion.
Okay. Any other comments? Seeing none, I would ask Clerk Cyprian to call the roll.
Levin,
Call the vote.
On the motion,
On the motion
To amend.
to amend
J
the
form.
J form.
aye.
Park,
Aye.
Conquest,
Aye.
Kennedy, absent. Mulliner,
Aye.
Brennan,
Aye.
Sabatino,
Aye.
Deuter,
Aye.
Dunn,
Aye.
Leader,
Aye.
Palumski,
Aye.
Graham,
Oh.
Saludo,
Aye.
York.
Aye.
12 ayes, 1 nay, 1 absent.
12 ayes, 1 nay, motion carries. J form will be so amended. That concludes discussion on the first item of our circle back list.
We're quitting at 10, right?
We're powering through. Clerk Spencer would want it that way. Circle back number 2, street and alley maintenance.
Check.
Alderman Bram, you asked that this be put on there. They have some additional information. Any comments or additional questions?
Jesus.
Sorry, I'm trying to refresh, since this was updated today, I'm trying to refresh my memory here. Yeah, the reason why I wanted to get an understanding, there's more information I would like to desire to review on this, but to understand, because this is now a budget line item for 2 different programs. I forgot what we used to call the,
The overhead sewer?
yeah, well, the storm sewer extension used to be called the rear yard drain, I believe. So I wanted to kind of have an understanding on, is that program kind of being phased out with the other program, the incentive program that we put in place, I don't know, I think this year, last year, whenever it was, which is incentive dollars to do some of these best practices. And it seems like it really is moving in that direction. Because the additional information that was provided was 30 dry wells were utilized, which is part of the incentive program, I believe, and then 12 of the rear yard drain program dollars were utilized as well. I'm not going to make a motion to change anything at this time. I'll discuss this in committee, but I think some foreshadowing here is something to consider of terminating the storm sewer extension program and just keeping the incentive program, because that's what it seems to be doing naturally. And I think there's a lot more benefit for the incentive program versus the rear yard drain or the storm sewer extension program.
Okay. So no motion, informational. Anyone else on this line item? Alderman Brand, back to you for circle back number 3, the Route 83 pedestrian bridge.
Okay, Route 83. So Route 83 is relatively new. I don't know if there was a timeline included on this one. I would say the last couple of years or so this was brought up. I have concern in regards to how we're utilizing our capital dollars in general. In the beginning of the budget book on page 3, I mean, on the 3rd paragraph down, it says, in reviewing the capital improvement plan, just as I presented at the city council meeting, there are more projects needing to be completed in the next 10 years than we have funding for. And I know we can always go for revenue, but I think we also have to be concerned with expenses as well, expenditures as well. What I was asking for, the additional information I was asking for was where is this really, are there any grant dollars tied to it? And I believe this is the one that does not currently have any grant dollars, but it was mentioned for possibly going for grant dollars. With this and the subsequent item on the circle backs list, I have concern if we should even keep it in the budget this year or going forward for that matter. It hasn't seen any action within the last couple of years, or very little action, I think mostly just conversation. So I guess what I would like to do is to make a motion to, on page, I think it's 146, 8025. I don't know if all those dollars are allocated, and maybe the city manager can help me out for this project. And are any of those in this year?
City manager.
Give us a few seconds to find the breakdown of that. Can I
Tab
make,
57.
can I make a couple comments?
Absolutely.
So this was a referral to a committee, and so the conversation that's been had is, can we find a partner for the Phase 1? I know we have a full Phase 1 budgeted here, but the question was, can we find a partner on that? We've talked to the Forest Preserve District, and unfortunately, they were not able to help us. We're looking to IDOT as a possibility. There's a study being done of the Route 83 corridor with Elmhurst, Bensonville, Addison, Wooddale, and the county. And so there's some hope that maybe there's some funding that could come out of that. Regarding construction dollars, we're fairly confident that we need the Phase 1 done to be able to apply for any future dollars. We refer to 2 different grant projects or grant pots in the memo. Certainly with CMAQ, we need to have the Phase 1 done, or at least well underway. And then as far as the TCM, maybe not the Phase 1, but certainly would score better if we had it. And so that's why it's in the status that it is right now. Regarding the breakdown of line item 8025, 160 of that is the Route 83 pedestrian bridge Phase 1. 150,000 is the Prairie Path at York underpass Phase 1. 100,000 is for, okay, that is the parking, bike parking area that we have a grant for. Director Killian explained in his comments that we are fronting the money and then we're gonna get paid back by other communities in the grant. That's 100,000. And then we have 150,000 in for a bike and pedestrian plan citywide to follow up on the bike plan that we have.
How much was the York?
I'm sorry?
How much was the York underpass again? What was that line item?
150,000, and that's in the 8025.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
I have a question before we move on the KEB 57, which kind of details this.
Right.
What? Yeah. Is Phase 1 $300,000?
No, the Phase 1 are estimated at 150 each.
Okay, under the amount and funding sources, you've got amount that's 140, but the funding source is 160. And then the reverse, the next year.
Yeah, Scrivener's there, I think.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, those should be opposite. The 160 should be in 2019 and the 140 in 2020.
All right, that makes sense. Bram, you had a follow-up?
Yes,
So I'm sorry, did you make a motion?
not yet, no.
Okay, all right, I want to make sure I didn't miss it.
I was just trying to get an understanding of that line item on page 146 where the breakdown was for 8025. Due to the impact of, at first I thought this was, and my mistake, as I looked at the CAB page 57, I thought this was coming out of the capital improvement fund, but this is showing a GO bond. Is this a GO bond that we've already issued, or is this something that we're planning to issue for this and other projects?
That would be a future bond issue.
Future being next year then, for 2019, since that's where this project is proposed for phase one?
Depending on where grant funding might or might not come in.
Grant dollars wouldn't be applicable because phase one has to be paid for by the city, correct?
So if we move forward, that would be part of any bond issue in 2019.
Does, let me throw another wrinkle into this. Would any expenditures at this time in the next couple of years be TIF eligible?
I don't believe in either one of those that they would be TIF eligible from an existing TIF
Doesn't it
district.
go to, doesn't it improve the existing TIF?
I think it's too far north of TIF 3 to be tied into that.
Okay.
Good idea.
Any additional comments?
Yeah, I guess I'm gonna make a motion to delay consideration for this project and therefore remove it from this year's budget by making a motion to remove, I'm assuming this is correct, the $160,000 out of that $560,000, according to the CAB at least, or maybe it's 140, I'm confused with the flip and the flop.
160 is correct.
160. Make a motion to remove the 160,000 out of page 146, line item 80-25.
Okay, motion to reduce the line item at 8025 on page 146 to $400,000, which is a reduction of $160,000.
Good job on the math, sir.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? I don't see a second. Alderman Bram, motion fails for lack of second. Continued conversation.
Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Brennan?
Question?
Sure.
Oh, I thought you said further discussion.
I did.
Oh.
Absolutely.
On this topic?
Anything you want.
Sorry. So I am curious, so after seeing the sub-area plan, I mean, I think we all sort of, we're thinking, holy cow, pedestrians crossing that intersection, whether it's on ground or whether it's an overpass. The only applicability for me with this project is if we do some sort of, sub-area plan and expansion on that corner. There's a hotel there. I see the applicability there for those people that are staying there to safely get from the west side to the east side. So I guess this seems aligned with what we're thinking there, potentially. 160K seems a little steep, but I guess my question, if this were delayed a year, basically that just puts us in a position of not being able to submit anything for grants, or if something did kick in and we wanted to take on a project, we would be limited because we're a year further down the road.
That's correct.
Best example I would give about this type of planning and engineering, just to focus council's thoughts, is when you look at the number, it's usually pretty big, the engineering costs, for something that might not happen. But I would point to our train station, where we weren't gonna get a dime if we didn't have it. This is kind of the entry ticket to a lot of funding, especially when it's transportation stuff. This is kind of the expectation, and try to make it up somewhere else. I mean, if we delay it, literally would just delay our ability to, we might be back here next year. The other thing I will say in general about this budget, it's a planning document. Numbers like this, we're getting a little granular. Numbers like this will be evaluated individually. I mean, the amount of stuff that, point to Public Works, because they spend like nobody's business. But the amount of stuff that they go over, and because either the environment isn't right, or the whatever project isn't right, the amount of stuff that they push off to next year it's a significant amount of money. So while I appreciate good conversation, big numbers like this, unless you are adamantly opposed, which is fine, and you make motions to take it out, or you want to increase it, that's fine, but a lot of this stuff kind of puts me in the mind of fairies. A lot of this stuff is going to be discussed in much greater detail at the committee level. Alderman York.
Thank you, Your Honor. So the referral, I think, well, I know came from Alderman Dunn and myself, and we've actually encountered each other on foot and on bike and whatnot on Lake Street crossing over 83 there. So just to remind, you know, the council that there is not really a safe way to cross over Route 83 that most people are going to feel safe with. I'll do it 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning on Lake Street, that's fine. But 3rd Avenue in Bensonville is an intersection that has a stoplight there. That's relatively safe. It's not too wide and whatnot. Other than that, we're talking at Route 64, which has been identified tonight as a very unsafe situation. So this proposal is to study something between North Avenue and Lake Street that would also intersect with the Greenway, what's that thing called? The Greenway? Salt Creek Greenway Trail on the other side of 83. So it's really a great potential project, and certainly beneficial to folks who live on the north side of Elmhurst to access, you know, public trails and whatnot. So again, as the mayor's pointed out and a couple others, is if we don't have the planning for this done and there is a funding source, it's not going to happen. And it's really something that, you know, needs to be done. If you drive further south on 83, you see a couple, you know, bike bridges over there in other communities and whatnot, and I think Elmhurst is deserving of that opportunity as well.
Okay, additional comments? Alderman Honquist.
I agree with Alderman York and I'm in support of it. Thank you.
Okay, any additional comments? And I see no pending motions, we'll move on. Agenda item 4, Alderman Bram, Prairie Path grade separation at York Street. Very similar, I think we're in the same, might even be in the same line item.
Same line item.
Same line item, the floor is yours.
This one has been around for a while. To me, it seems like it was greater than 10 years that this has first been entered into the budget. There's been a lot of discussion on this potential of an underpass, not an overpass, for many years. And as you can tell by the summary provided today by city staff, that funding was requested back in 2012, so 6+ years. And the estimates are back out in 2014, being an estimate of over $2.3 million for an underpass. So we all know inflation happens, and I'm sure that estimate is a lot higher now today, 4 years later, compared to back then. The request that I was asking for city staff was the background, a timeline, supporting documentation, but also, which I'm not sure if I read here, was, and I know this has been discussed almost every single year on this project, is if we still have these grant dollars, because from what I recall, we've applied for and quote-unquote received, I don't know how we define received, but committed, grant dollars were committed for this project. But again, this was probably, well, according to the information before us, 6 years ago. So my first question is, are those grant dollars still committed to this project? Because I know we discussed in Public Works at one time that the grant dollars were removed from being committed to this project to the 83 overpass project, but then, since then, I've heard otherwise. So are there any grant dollars tied to this project at all?
City Manager.
Thank you. Yes, the grant dollars are still committed to the city of Elmhurst for this project. I think the question at the committee was, can we change it from this project to the Route 83 project? And the answer to that is no, we cannot. We need to apply brand new for any other bike path type funding. But I do sit on the Transportation Technical Committee for the DuPage Mayor and Managers, the Deputy Director, and that's where these dollars are decided. And I've checked with the staff at DuPage Mayor and Managers, and those dollars are still committed to the city of Elmhurst.
Thank you. I don't know if I should even ask that. So I guess I don't see this project moving forward. I think that there's, like I've already mentioned, I just discovered now that this as well is coming out of a GO bond, not the capital improvement fund like I thought walking in tonight. There's more important projects in my mind, in my perspective, or capital and projects that need to be completed. One of the questions that's coming up on the circle back list, which I asked, was the water mains. Accelerating that program, or at least doing what staff requires as a minimal going forward, is something very important. Plus, the capital improvement fund itself is dwindling down. The fund balance is getting lower. We've had the bite at this apple for over 6 years. Again, it feels like it's at least been 10, because it was Alderman Healy's request back then. So I would like to make the same motion. I don't know if it's the same dollar amount. It looks like it's a little bit different. A motion to amend page 146, line item 8025, to reduce that from 560 minus 150,000, so $410,000, to delay doing any additional work on this program for this upcoming fiscal year.
Okay, we have a motion before us to reduce the line item 8025 on page 146 from 560 to 410,000. Do I have a second? No second. Additional conversation? Seeing none, we will move on. Agenda item 5, stormwater detention projects. Alderman Deuter, page 264. I think this had to do with buyouts, if I'm not mistaken. 8014. Okay, land acquisition. Alderman Deuter, you wanted to have additional conversation?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So if folks look at line 8004 on page 264, you'll see kind of what has been accumulated at our direction. So a number of years ago, council directed staff to add, I think it started at $1 million in the budget to fund property buyouts. I think if I recall the discussion at the time, there was some sense that there'd be some homes we just would not be able to get to, and the best way to provide flood relief would be to acquire those homes. So we started at $1 million. I think at some point it went down to $500,000, and those funds have accumulated each year at our direction. So we've used those dollars a couple of times. In 2016, we used about $900,000 to buy I think it was 3 homes on Washington Street. So that was part of a underground detention that was done on Washington. And in 2017, we acquired a home on Park that had some strategic benefits and was in an area that was going to be hard to serve. Then in 2017, we spent almost $300,000. So we have had expenses that have not come anywhere close to the dollars that we've been setting aside. And I think as we look at, the committee discusses stormwater mitigation projects going forward, we really don't have buyouts being an element of that. We have certain areas that it's our intent to serve through a project. Those dollars are all funded separately. Most of those projects, the big ones are York High School and an infrastructure project in southwest Elmhurst that would serve the Sailor Swain-Villette area. So those projects are funded separately. If at some point those projects required a buyout instead of either an infrastructure project or using open space that's already available, we could use the project dollars to, the dollars that are set aside for the project expense to do buyouts. That's what we did for Geneva. The Geneva project did not use any property buyout dollars. It instead used the money that was allocated for the East End project. So I think, I think at our committee, we should have a discussion about how to best utilize the dollars that have already been set aside for property buyouts. But I would recommend that for 2019, we do not fund an additional $500 into the property buyout program. So not, and this is, just to be clear, this is not because we do not have stormwater expenses. We do, it continues to be a priority. I think the way that we are approaching those projects does not emphasize property buyouts, and we have dollars allocated for those projects that we're envisioning. So with that, Mayor, I think I would make a motion to amend line 8004 to take the 2019 projected amount down to 0.
Okay, we have a motion before us to reduce the line item on page 264, 80-04, from $500,000 down to $0. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Alderman York. Discussion? Additional discussion? Alderman Levin?
Oh, he's getting ready to talk.
Well, I just wondered if the committee had talked about this proposal, and it's a little unusual that staff would have this amount budgeted if it wasn't worked through with committee first, so I'm trying to see if I can get a feel for how it would have developed to the point where it's recommended in the budget by staff, and then the vice chairman of the committee saying we should take it out.
Staff might be able to answer this better. My understanding from the conversations I've had with staff is that it was a number of years ago that there was an amendment during the budget process to add $1 million. That was funded, I think, at that level a couple of years. I think staff recommended it, taking it down to $500,000.
Correct.
And I think staff has left it in there because we haven't directed them to do otherwise.
And may I
Yeah.
continue? So is your recommendation to take it out of this line and that's it, or are you recommending to move it to a different line?
I am recommending that this 2019 amount, that instead of increasing the amount that we have for buyouts by an additional $500,000, that we do not increase that buyout amount next year. So just to clarify, if you look at the line, the 2018 numbers, the budget and estimated, the reality is that this is how staff is reflecting that. They're saying, maybe we'll spend those dollars. I think that's more of an accounting issue, that they're showing that those $1.8 million will be expended this year. They won't. So somewhere else in the budget, it shows that next year they're projecting 2.3 would be available for property buyouts. So I'm not suggesting that we do anything with the 1.8. If there is an opportunity to do a buyout, as there was with Park in 2017, Park Street, Park Avenue.
All right, but, and this is a budgeting question, because it would seem to me that if we had 1.8 in 2018, let's say we didn't spend $1 of it, it's not there anymore unless we put, and I don't think it carries forward. So the 500 is like, of that 1.8, let's release 900, wrong math, 1.3 million, and we're gonna keep 500 in the budget. So that 1.8 is kind of gone. I mean, and that's, maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, I don't,
Let's
we
get
can
a
get
clarification. It seems like City Manager Trozine wants, sorry, boy, everyone's getting a promotion tonight.
Musical titles.
Jennifer Alderman.
Director Trozine wants to add.
So, I mean, we could reduce the carryover. Again, I think I mentioned at the last meeting, staff's intention would be to carry over the $1.8 million, add it to the 500,000. So the budget, the final budget for 2019 would be $2.3 million. We could just reduce the carryover and only do $1.3 million in carryover, keep the 500,000 in the budget, and do it that way.
It's the same thing.
The same exact
The
same
same
thing.
thing.
All right, so what you're saying is, you're really saying, let's cut $500,000 out of the budget.
I'm saying we do not need an additional 500,000 for an activity that we haven't even spent what's already available.
But just so I'm clear, we just did a tax levy, and so 500,000 of it would be presumed to go into this line item. We're saying we're not gonna use that 500,000, it's not going somewhere else.
That's correct.
All right, so I think we should redo the levy.
Redo the levy.
Right.
I think the other thing that Alderman Deuter pointed out that might have been missed, and maybe I'm misinterpreting it, but when it comes to these property acquisitions and buyouts, it kind of is when the opportunity presents itself. You don't, sometimes the homes are for sale, sometimes homes aren't for sale. And the committee, Alderman Deuter being on the committee, has a pretty good indication of what's needed and what isn't needed. I think what I'm hearing is that 1.8 is a nice amount to have in your pocket for home buyouts. That's not to say, and we have had this conversation numerous times, if all of a sudden we needed 2.3 or 3.4 or 4.5 of home buyouts, if the committee and council decided it, we could do it. But in this case, the motion is being made to reduce the overall budget by 500,000, allow the carryover 1.8. I'm trying to sum up because we're at 10:30. My eyes are going cross. 26. We're at 10:26. So let's stick to substantive conversations and additions you think will help your fellow council members get to a decision. Any additional comments as it relates to Alderman Deuter's motion? Alderman York.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I'm supportive of this. We have, if I'm hearing staff correct, $1.8 million in this fund for home buyouts. And we really haven't had an opportunity, as Alderman Deuter explained, to utilize that. And then as things crop up from time to time, they may be part of a project and, may be kind of bundled into the funding for that. So for that reason, I'm in support of this, and, as I mentioned in my comments earlier this evening regarding the tax levy, if there's an opportunity for the city to move on something that's integral and strategic for this type of an operation, we have the wherewithal to do that, to make some short-term decisions. We have a working cash fund, for example, that has $1 million in it. We have money to use in the short term until we're able to package it as part of a GO bond issue or something along those lines. So it's not like subtracting the $500,000 out of the budget for this particular item is going to hamstring us in any way, shape, or form as far as actions we may be able to take, unless we're interested in buying something like the patent thing for $13 million or something like that for stormwater. But that's an extreme case. So I'm fully in support of this, and think that we'll be just fine.
Additional
But
conversations?
we will revisit the tax levy.
Any additional conversation as it relates to this motion? Alderman Bram.
Yes, thank you. I don't want to reiterate what others have said, but I'm going to put a different perspective on what was said. We don't know when something's going to hit. We don't have any idea on when we'll need these dollars. Have they been used? Well, sparingly, not very much, but we purposely set a separate account aside to track and to make sure we have a good understanding of buying out property. So we have dollars allocated to buying out properties. I don't know why $500,000 is the magic number. And I do understand the carryover dollars from previous years, but we can talk about the carryover dollars for every single account number that we haven't talked about in this budget. We haven't talked about carryover dollars for any other item other than this one. I don't see a problem with leaving it in there. There are some good areas that could serve as buyout. Now, does it occur or not? Depends on the homeowners if they want to sell. But it will help neighborhood flooding. And that's the purpose of it. I do have a question for, I almost said Director Trozine. Are dollars specifically allocated to this account number? I know we were doing something like the sales tax for a certain account number. Was it this account number, or were dollars specifically directed to this one or another account number?
So there are dollars specifically for this account. The sales tax numbers that this fund receives is dedicated towards the debt service. But this property buyout is funded by the general fund. So you'll see a transfer in from general fund into the stormwater fund. So the stormwater fund has a revenue source, the transfer, and then the property buyout expense line item.
Was this account the one that we said 1/4% goes to, or was that a
The
different?
1/4% home rule sales tax that's allocated, the stormwater fund is for debt service.
For debt service? I mean, it's indirectly tied.
All stormwater.
It's all stormwater.
Okay. All right.
Alderman Deuter.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to reiterate, I think, the time that we thought buyouts might be a part of our strategy as kind of a standalone outside of an actual project is when we knew, we were starting to become familiar with the idea that there are going to be some homes that even when we do projects, they're at low points and we can't serve them. So I think the notion of, there might be some homes that we have to buy out fit in with that thinking. And I just want to share, someone came to one of our committee meetings recently, and she said, her request was, she was in the Sailor Swain Villette area, and she wanted to know if she was going to be one of those houses that couldn't be served. Because she said, because I just want to know, because if I am, I'm going to sell to a builder. And so, the notion that there are going to be some homes that just have to be bought and that's the outcome for that person. That's how we provide that relief. The reality is those folks can sell their homes to a builder who can structure the house differently and be, have a tax-paying property. It'd be out of the, that's how they get their flood relief. So there's a builder who would buy that home. So I think the way that we're going to be using property buyouts going forward is really when we can't find open space. So we're going to be doing this in conjunction with a project, and again, that funding is in the budget. So I think our approach is very solid with the 1.8 for the one-offs that come up. We'll have that to work with. We might even decide as a committee to use that in a different way as we start to think about how we're going to pay debt service for some of the stormwater projects going forward. But for now, we've got a very robust pot to work with for buyouts, and I don't think it's prudent for us to continue to increase that.
Okay, any final comments? Clerk Cyprian.
Levin,
Aye.
Park,
Aye.
Conquest,
Aye.
Kennedy, absent, Mulliner,
Aye.
Brennan,
Aye.
Sabatino,
Aye.
Deuter,
Aye.
Dunn,
Aye.
Leader,
Aye.
Solomsky,
Aye.
Graham,
No.
Toledo,
Aye.
York,
Aye.
12 ayes, 1 nay, 1 absent.
12 ayes, 1 nay, motion carries. On to circle back number 6, water mains. And water main replacement, staff proposing a phase-in of 3.2 million annual replacement. Alderman Brand, you had a question.
Yeah, staff's additional feedback on this answered my questions. I mean, we've been talking about various capital projects, almost every single one before this item. And here's a project that I think should be accelerated. But upon receiving the feedback from staff, even if there were dollars found for this project, at least for this upcoming fiscal year, they essentially said that it would be, I don't want to say impossible, but would be a great challenge to be able to do so due to the engineering and design needed. So with that said, I'll take staff's recommendation and there will be no motion.
Okay, circle back number 7. Salaries of elected officials. Is that me?
It was Alderman Kennedy.
Oh, outstanding. Wow. Alderman Kennedy?
Item completed.
What?
Item completed, check.
Well, I will opine on this because I had the same, I had thoughts as well. I do think at some point, some committee of ours, finance or somebody, should take a look at salary of elected officials. It has not been adjusted for 17 years. And I do think that the work of most of the elected officials that I'm aware of far out, the expenses just simply being an elected official outweighs the pay, I'll say, of $2,400 a year. So, Alderman York.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, since this is a Finance, Council Affairs, and Administrative Services Committee, we would be happy to entertain some staff recommendations for updating of this policy. And we'll get that on the agenda just as quickly
I
as we can.
apologize. The other thing I'll say is, it's not like anybody here is voting themselves a raise, because we got to do this 6 months out before an election. So we're talking about 2021 at this point, before anybody would see a raise. Not that anybody here is doing it for the money, but this would truly be a vote for your future elected officials. But I do think it's something that merits review. Agenda item 8, bad debt expense. Alderman York.
Thank you, Your Honor. It's peanuts, $5,000 was the amount on this, I think, or something like that. I was kind of interested just to find out what that $5,000 was for. And I'm okay with moving right along.
Okay, great. And circle back 9, Finance Department banking expenses. This is about people paying their city bills with a credit card.
Correct.
Is this me?
That was you.
That was.
What's the amount? Merchant fees on credit cards, payment to the city, 97. So break it down for me at 10:30 at night. Of the 112,900, how much is, are we paying for people's miles?
97,000.
97,000?
97.
That's correct.
Chairman York, have you looked at this?
We have, actually. The committee has looked at this in the past. I think it was a couple of years ago, probably. And it's something that we continue to look at. I think we're doing a comprehensive revenue review, fees and all these kinds of things. So I'm sure it will come up, back up in the normal course of business, and we can review it.
Okay, well,
And then there are additional fees also in the MUF.
Sure.
That are aside from this. This is just the general fund. So.
I do think that it merits a closer look.
Yep.
I would consider it convenience at this point, since we do have alternate forms of payment that they are no charge to the city. And as we're always looking to shepherd our tax dollars wisely, I think this is something that we could look at. Okay? But wait, that's not all. Kent Johnson sent a memo regarding residential stormwater management.
That was the previous agenda item.
Was it?
Yep.
Must be here.
Have we covered this?
I'm walking away.
Oh,
I'm getting up now.
all right. Anything else that was not on our circle back that any elected official wishes to discuss regarding our budget? Staff, do you have direction to prepare a final budget for us to vote on 2 weeks from now?
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Like I really need an agenda item for this. Motion to adjourn. Motion by Alderman Bram, second by Alderman Palumski. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.